Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at theDove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Okay, welcome back. And my guest today is Dr. Patrick Gillette, and he's going to be one of the featured speakers on a series now of conversations about dying and living well until it happens. And this is going to occur, it's free of charge, and it's going to happen over the next 8 Thursdays at the Smullen Center here in Medford. And you're welcome to join them either at 2 o'clock in the afternoon or 7 o'clock in the evening, however your schedule works out. And he's going to be the first speaker talking about Alzheimer's. Dr. Gillette, nice to have you with us.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here, Perry.
All right, Alzheimer's. Senility, dementia, Alzheimer's. Is there a difference?
Well, it's like, what's the difference between chicken noodle soup and soup?
Okay. Well.
Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia.
Okay.
So people are afraid of the word Alzheimer's disease, but they aren't so afraid of dementia. But if you have dementia, there's about a 2/3 chance you have Alzheimer's disease.
All right. Now, you've been dealing with this for a long time, haven't you?
Yes.
Quite a few years. And your lecture is about an hour or so long. And what do you want people to get from this? To understand what the disease is and how to care for it?
How to care for it, how to deal with the process of it, how to plan ahead, because it is a terminal illness. They may not die from Alzheimer's disease, but Alzheimer's disease, when it's in the mix, certainly is something to consider. It also makes it's more difficult to make decisions when you have Alzheimer's disease, so you need to make any decisions you can early on.
Early on.
In fact, before you have Alzheimer's disease.
Okay, right. And that's basically what this whole series is about. Get your life in order, and I think that's a stewardship issue, quite frankly. All right, so one of the most difficult parts of managing this disease is the person who has to help or care for those who have it.
Yes.
And I don't know, you probably got all the stories, but what's your advice there?
My advice is get help. Make sure you have time off where you can go fishing if you want to, or go see a movie. That's a huge impact. Also learn how to deal with it, and deal with it in a non-confrontational way. One of the phrases that I pass on to caregivers a lot is "not today." When the person with Alzheimer's asks the same question, you know, when can I move back home, or when can I drive? If you say no, then that's sort of slam the door shut in their face, and they're going to get angry and deal with it however they can. But if you say not today, it's like, oh, okay, well, I'll bring it up again tomorrow. And tomorrow might be 5 minutes from now, but not today. It's a very simple phrase.
How do you care for somebody you love who suffers with this when you want to communicate sensibly with them and you just can't?
Well, a friend of mine, Tom Sanford, who deals with teenagers, came up with this phrase that I use a lot, and that is, if logic doesn't work, don't use it.
Okay.
And that's why you never lie to somebody, even with Alzheimer's disease. Never lie to them, because they're going to know it. Just change the subject. Give a passive statement like the "not today," or maybe we can do that a little later. Just put it off. If they come up with the same story that they've had, express some interest in it and say, well, what about this, and try and get them to change directions. You can learn something else about them.
There you go. What's happening to them physically when this starts?
Well, it starts long before it shows up. And it starts by neurons losing their ability to communicate with each other. And eventually the neurons die off in the brain, and they're not able to remember. And it's spotty. It's like Swiss cheese. It hits here and there, and it hits different in different people. So it starts long before anybody knows it, because your body can adapt up to a certain point. And then once it reaches that point, it becomes evident. And sometimes it's the ones closest to them that have the hardest time accepting it, because they've adapted as well. The spouse will adapt to these changes, and it's no problem until something happens to the spouse. They end up in the hospital. They end up...
Is the brain not only losing its memory, is it also affecting body functions? Is that shutting down too?
No, it doesn't. That will happen secondarily, but it happens more in the areas where memory is.
Where memory is.
Yes.
Okay. Speech?
Speech it will affect speech.
Okay. Now, there's been suggestions. Well, you change things. You make you stimulate them in another direction. Maybe you teach them how to run a computer, or you rearrange the furniture in the room. Does that work?
Sometimes it does. Sometimes that causes more confusion. Some of the things I try and institute early on, it's interesting because music seems to be in a different part of the brain, and so people can remember their hymns and sing all the words to all the hymns, but they can't remember the name of their wife.
Really?
Yeah. And that's an individual thing. So you try different things. One thing I like to have people do is, in prevention of it, and also early on, is try and memorize. And Proverbs are great to memorize because they're short and simple, and they're pithy sayings, and they're kind of fun. But reading out loud is another thing. And Hardy Boy's mystery stories that we read as kids are great because they're written at about an 8th grade level, and they're short chapters, and they can read the same chapter every day.
Wow.
But have them read it out loud, and that helps maintain speech as well.
Is medication used to treat this?
There are medications that are used to treat the symptoms of it, and they help. As the brain continues to decline, we try and enhance what's left. And the medications, there are 5 medications that are approved, and sometimes they're almost miraculous how well they work. That's very, very rare, but I've seen it happen. Otherwise, it helps maintain function. We always focus on Alzheimer's disease of just being memory, but it's also activities of daily living and behavior. Depression is very common with Alzheimer's disease. They can't dress themselves anymore. They have trouble bathing themselves, and that's as the burden falls more and more on the caregiver.
What about social interaction? Does that help or hurt?
Social interaction is a great prevention, and it also helps as long as the people that they're socially interacting with understand something about the disease. And if family reunions are really hard on Alzheimer's patients because they, their grandson comes up and says, "Hey, remember me, Grandpa? I'm your favorite grandson." He has no idea who's looking at him, and so you go up and say, "Hi, I'm Pat, your favorite grandson." And you just do simple things like you give them the answer so that they don't have to stop and think about it.
Sometimes this is very devastating to families, especially when they can't remember their spouse's name or they don't remember the child's name, and you've seen it. At what point is it okay not to have them in your home and not care for them on a daily basis?
I think the point, that's a great question. The point, and it's an individual choice, but when you can no longer be the spouse because you're too busy being a caregiver, you need to let somebody else be the caregiver. And the spouse feels responsible and they want to make sure that they're being well cared for. Well, if they continue, they're not going to be able to care for them.
But the change of the one who is suffering with the disease to another home, facility, or whatever, is that, some people are under a lot of guilt. That's cruel, I don't want to do that. But at the same time, that might be just the right thing to do.
Yes. And it's better for the spouse to oversee the care of another caregiver than the spouse not being able to because they're too ill or they die from taking care of them.
All right. What can you say to children who don't understand what's happening to grandma or grandpa?
It's hard because if they live locally, they'll be a little more aware of it. But if they're just visiting every once in a while, when they come in and visit, a person with Alzheimer's will rise to the occasion and sparkle for a day or two. And we don't understand how that works, but it happens a lot.
Is there a timeline here from the time you're literally diagnosed to where it...
It's anywhere, the numbers are 2 to 20 years.
2 to 20.
Roughly. I've seen people with it longer than that. I've seen people with it, once diagnosis, not last very long at all.
And it's not necessarily restricted to the elderly, is it?
No, it's about 6 to 10% are below age 65. As you get up to age 85, it approaches 45% of people. If you hit 100, it doesn't seem to occur as frequently if you're over 100.
Now, for those of us who are moving on,
yes,
what do we do to prevent it?
I usually recommend 4 things. One is a healthy lifestyle, which would include diet, a healthy diet high in antioxidants, not in pills form, but in healthy food, exercise, physical exercise, mental exercise, which is important, just playing crossword puzzles. You don't have to get them right. I hate crossword puzzles, but you don't have to get them right, just do them. Learning a new language. A friend of mine down at UCLA advocates if you're right-handed, 1 day a week you should just write with your left hand.
Wow.
Because it uses the other side of your brain a little bit. And also social interaction. Going to church is good for you.
Yeah, right. Yes, we know that in many, many ways. That's wonderful. All right, so coming up Thursday will be the first of Conversations About Dying and Living Well Until It Happens.
And it's the same talk at 2 o'clock and at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, it's the same one. They're going to have 2 sessions. You can go to the 2 o'clock one or the 7 o'clock one there at the Smullen Center. And quickly, just highlight what you're going to cover.
Well, I sort of a journey through Alzheimer's disease. The mind gets tangled and how it kind of works. I have a theory called the cocoon theory that we'll talk about. It's kind of an interesting approach to it.
All right. They're at the Smullen Center, and Dr. Gillette will be the first speaker, so don't miss it. I think you'll find this to be very helpful and very resourceful. Again, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then a repeat of the same seminar at 7 o'clock in the evening coming up this Thursday at the Smullen Center. Thank you, Dr. Gillette.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next time.